Today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show, we're going to talk about last week's Sly Flourish article, next week's Sly Flourish article, the Sly Flourish summer sale, which is going on right now. City of Arches is now available on the Shard virtual tabletop. I had the opportunity to write a GM guide for the Beadles and Grimm Legendary Edition of Tyranny of Dragons. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I was on with Luke Hart on DM's Lair. I'm going to talk about that. Michelle and I are supporting the Let's Quest this year. We donated money to Let's Quest to help after-school programs. I'm hoping that you can help after-school programs. And if you are an after-school program, I would love you to reach out to them to get help for your club. We're going to look at the monsters section of the 5e Artisanal Monster Database today. We have new details on the D&D starter set that I wanted to share. And I have two, not one, but two tips to talk to you about today. First, we're going to talk about choosing your next role-playing game. How do you decide what game you want to run next? And then we're going to talk about losing ourselves in the fiction. How do we forget some of the drama and mechanics and kind of the real world and lose ourselves in the fiction in our daily lives so that we can bring some of that joy of diving into the fiction in the games that we're running. And we're going to cover more questions from the Patreon, from the Sly Flourish Patreon Q&A, all today on the Lazy RPG Talk Show. I'm Mike Shea, your pal from Sly Flourish, here to talk about all things in tabletop role-playing games. This past week, I published the article Lazy World Building on the Sly Flourish website. You can see it at slyflourish.com, Lazy World Building. You can also find a link down in the show notes where I talk about what it takes to build to build an entire world the lazy way. Next week's article is Avoid NPC Betrayal. This article will be published on Monday on slyflourish.com, but the best way to get it is by subscribing to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You can find a link in the show notes. You get a free adventure generator, and you get articles like this emailed to your inbox every week. Every article also at the bottom of it includes tips. It includes information about the talk show, like what you're listening to right now. It includes RPG tips. It includes links to all of the stuff that I link to. It includes other videos that I've shot. So there's links to everything else that I've done at the bottom of the article. And then at the top of the article is the article of the week, which is there specifically designed to help you run your games. So please sign up for the newsletter and you can get stuff like that. Right now, starting today, and as of this recording, August 10th, and it's live right now, and going on until 20 August, Michelle and I are having a 20% off sale on the Sly Flourish bookstore. All products except for City of Arches are 20% off, the 20% off is applied at checkout. So, for example, if you were to pick up the hardcover version of the Lazy DM's Forge of Foes, you add it to your cart, and you view your cart, you will see that it is discounted from $39.99 to $32, and the discount is applied automatically. But not only that, if your order is $60 or more, which includes digital products, you can get free U.S. shipping. So free shipping on any order of $60 or more, including the 20% off. So that is going on now. It is going on until August 20th. So you have just a week or so, a little bit more than a week in order to get on this sale. This is a perfect time to fill up your library of all of the fine books that we publish, both in PDF and digital copies. So all of our books, 20% off, except for City of Arches, because City of Arches is too new. But everything else is 20% off and free domestic shipping if your order is $60 or more. Check it out. You can find it in the show notes. Also, City of Arches is now available on Shard Tabletop. If you are a user of Shard Tabletop, you can pick up the City of Arches on Shard for $20. If you are a Kickstarter backer, I sent out a update through BackerKit last week with the link so that you can get City of Arches on Shard Tabletop for $10. All of the information available to you in the City of Arches. The whole book is there. All of the text is there. And we have all of the maps. We even have tokens on the maps for the adventures, all built into Shard Tabletop. $20 on Shard if you were not a backer of the Kickstarter. If you were a backer of the Kickstarter, please check out your BackerKit rewards. You can find it there. Check your email and spam folders to see if you got the link in there. That gives it to you for $10. You get half off for the Shard version if you are a backer. If you cannot find that, look at the updates from the Kickstarter, and you will see that there is a link to get your BackerKit links mailed to you that has it. And if you can't do that, then you can email support@slyflourish.com, and we will get you set up. We can send you the link so that you can get the City of Arches for Shard Tabletop for 50% off. That's $10 to get City of Arches on Shard Tabletop. So a project that I worked on earlier this year, kind of a fun project, Beadle and Grimm, creator of exclusive versions, big, awesome box sets of adventures, are putting out a legendary edition of Tyranny of Dragons. Tyranny of Dragons are the first 2 adventures for D&D 5th edition, Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. I really love these adventures. I wrote a lot about these adventures on slyflourish.com, and the fine folks at Beadle and Grimm reached out to me and said, hey, we know you had written these old articles. We would love for you to work on this. We want a GM's guide for it. We want somebody that has experience having run it. I've run it a couple of times, and we'd like you to kind of write a guide chapter by chapter on the kinds of things a GM can keep in mind while running this adventure. So I had an excellent opportunity to do that. I wrote that guide for them, and it is going to be part of the legendary edition of Tyranny of Dragons. It's a little pricey, $3.59. You actually get it on sale right now. I think that's about 10% off. That sounds like it's about 10% off. So you can get it for $3.59 instead of the normal $3.99. What do you get? $400. That's a lot. Well, you get a big pile of miniatures, so that's cool. You get all of the books broken out into segments that make them easy to run at play. You get monster cards for everything. You get huge maps. There's a big map gallery. I think it comes with a big poster tube of many of the maps for the locations, a dedicated DM screen with all of the information on it. And this one is going to be updated for D&D 2024. All the monster stat blocks that are part of this are going to be updated for D&D 2024. I think it's exclusive. I think that this is the only place where you can get D&D 2024 stat blocks for Tyranny of Dragons, for Rise of Tiamat and Horde of the Dragon Queen and Rise of Tiamat. Anyway, really fun project to work on. Fun working with those guys. And now you can get you can pre-order it now, the legendary edition of Tyranny of Dragons, if you want to see that. Really fun adventure if you've not run it. I really enjoyed it. So this past week also, I had a wonderful opportunity to chat with Luke Hart on the DM's Lair, where the two of us got together and talked about things going on in the world of D&D. We had 2 big topics that we discussed, one of which was all of the announcements coming out from Critical Role and Darrington Press, what that felt like, what we thought about Brendan Lee Mulligan picking up Critical Role, for example. Lots of talk about that. And then we spent a good deal of time continuing the conversation that I had in my show last week about D&D Beyond, what it means for publishers, what it means for customers, what's the whole issue going on with D&D Beyond. And it was really fun. And Luke, immediately, it was really fun because I started to describe the situation for publishers on D&D Beyond, and immediately he understood the issues. And he started telling me what all of the issues were that came to his mind as soon as I described the situation. He's like, wait a minute, that means you don't do X, that you don't do Y, you don't do Z, you don't do A, B, and C. He immediately understood what the issues were as far as being a publisher on D&D Beyond. So that was really fun. So if you enjoyed my rant from last week, I did like 40 minutes talking about D&D Beyond. If you wanted to hear more stuff about that, if that topic interested you and you want to hear myself and Luke Hart discussing that more, you can hear about it on the DM's Lair. And in the end, I offered some positive thoughts about it. I offered some positivity about where things are, which is the reality is we do not rely upon D&D Beyond to enjoy D&D. We do not rely on Wizards of the Coast to enjoy D&D. We own all the products. We can own them for our whole lives. We have lots of stuff that we have for them. There are many third parties that are publishing for it. Also, even if you love 5e and not D&D, there's many versions of 5e. And if you don't even like 5e, there's so many different role-playing games. Massive. The hobby is in such a good state that with all of my angst about D&D Beyond that I said, the reality is that's a small issue. It's a small issue. I focus on it. I spend a lot of time because it's like the one issue where I see this stuff, but it's really not that big a deal. And we can enjoy so many RPGs. And we're going to talk about that more today. Anyway, it was a really fun conversation. You can find a link to my conversation with Luke Hart at the DM's Lair in the show notes. Really, really good time. Thanks to Luke for having me on. Michelle and I, one of the things that we like to do every year because of you guys, because of supporting the work that I do through Patreon and through books, through picking up books and all sorts of other things, is we like to give back to the RPG community in lots of ways. And one of the ways that we do it was we usually every year donated money to after-school programs. We took a portion of money and we would open ourselves up to after-school programs that could reach out to us, and we would fund them directly to give them supplies for running their role-playing games. Supplies and support for running their role-playing games. Well, we have now partnered up with Let's Quest. Let's Quest is an actual honest-to-God 501c3 that supports after-school programs and libraries with tabletop role-playing game supplies. So instead of us running our own program, because we are not a 501c3, C3, so we had lots of kind of tricky ways that we had to deal with the whole situation. We said it is better for us to take the money that we were going to give to after-school programs and instead donate it to Let's Quest so that Let's Quest can support programs. So instead of coming to us, we suggest you go to Let's Quest. We talked to them about it. We've chatted with them through email, telling them, hey, by the way, we're going to give you some money, but also we want to send people your way for after school programs. So please, what does 501c3 means that you are a nonprofit, an actual nonprofit with tax exempt status. Because Michelle and I run an actual LLC, we are not tax exempt from this kind of thing. So it means that more support can come from your money than you might not otherwise get. So reach out to Let's Quest. You can contact them directly and talk about your program, talk about the kind of stuff that you need. They send actual physical materials to you. And if you are interested in helping out, they have donation pages where you can donate to them directly. And that money that you donate to them goes to the material that they use to buy materials for after-school programs. So please, if you have an after-school program, if you have a library program, if you are running a program to run role-playing games, please reach out to Let's Quest. You can find a link down in the show notes. letsquestafterschool.org is the URL, but I will link to it in the show notes. You can reach out to them, tell them I sent you, and talk to them about the kind of support that they can give to your after-school program. There is also a resources page here. The resources page has lots of stuff that offers different things that you can use for free for your after-school program. So there's material here as well, digital materials that you can use for your program. And I would love to hear how it works out. So once you've reached out, once you've worked with Let's Quest, please email us at support@slyflourish.com and let us know how it went. Let us know what kind of support you got. Let us know how it all played out. We are very interested in hearing how the whole cycle worked. So if you are an after-school program looking for support, reach out to Let's Quest for that support. If you are an after-school program, if you are wanting to donate to an after-school program, please donate to Let's Quest. I would love to hear how the program works out for the clubs that actually need the support. So please check them out. That's Let's Quest. So I have been showing off various pieces of the 5e Artisanal Database. The 5e Artisanal Database is a whole set of tools built around all of the open material for 5th edition, for 5e material. This includes the 5.1 SRD, which is the D&D 2014 rules, the 5.2 SRD, which is the D&D 2024 rules, Black Flag from Tales of the Valiant, which is now available in a Creative Commons license, and Level Up Advanced 5e, plus stuff that I have released in a Creative Commons license, all available in this one tool set. There are rule sets available, there are databases available, there are tools that are available, random generators available, all of this available to patrons of Sly Flourish and all downloadable in one single package. So you can download a zip file, and on your desktop or laptop computer, you can open up that zip file and load it in your own browser and run it completely locally without ever reaching back to any server. So all the stuff that is here, you can download and own forever rather than trusting that it's kept up on a website. I like to show off different features, and one of the features I'm going to show off today is the monster database. So the monster database actually was the very first part of the 5e Artisanal Database. The 5e Artisanal Database used to be called the 5e Artisanal Monster Database, but now there's so many other parts of it that monsters is just one component. But boy, is it a big component. There are 3,148 stat blocks in the monster database. There is now a whole filter segment. We have 5.1 monsters, 5.2 monsters, Level Up Advanced 5e monsters, Black Flag, the Creature Codex, Forge of Foes, Tome Beast 2, Tome Beast 2023, and Tome Beast 3 are all available in here. So it's got a bunch of the Kobold Press monsters that are under the OGL, and then a whole bunch of the monsters that are available for 5th edition from 4 different flavors of 5th edition. So that's how you get to 3,100 total monsters. So the neat thing about this is you can do things like look for a cultist, right? We'll go for a fanatic. So we'll go for a fanatic. You have 4 different cult fanatics, 2 cult fanatics and 2 cultist fanatics, and you could decide which one you want. So you could be like, let's take a look at the old original 5.1 SRD cult fanatic. This is the one from the D&D 2014 monster manual. And you have the stat block for that, which was mostly set up in spells. That's how they got their power. Or you can look at the new Cult Fanatic from D&D 2024. So you can kind of pick which one you want. I actually have a preferred preference for the Black Flag Cultist Fanatic. My favorite Cultist Fanatic is the Black Flag Cultist Fanatic because it's got very simple sacrificial daggers and unholy bolts. It can do 20 damage, so it does a lot of damage, and it's got a bunch of spells, and it's got that cool unholy brand bonus action. So the Cultist Fanatic from Black Flag is actually my favorite one. The cool bit about the Artisanal Monster Database is that you have all of them. So from this one database, you can pick whichever monster you want, whichever one from whatever source you want. The MD, so somebody says, what is the MD? And the MD is to get it in Markdown. So if you want a Markdown version of the monster so that you can drop it into your Obsidian notebook or drop it into your Notion notebook, you have the Markdown version. Every monster has the Markdown version available to it. You can, of course, go to the filter and you can sort by types. You could say, I want to see dragons that are between 9th and 13th level. And I just want to see the ones from the Tome of Beast 2023. And you get like the young cave dragon and the young void dragon, right? These are from the Tome of Beast 2023. You can go in there and you can see the stat block for the 2023 Tome of Beast 2023 version of the dragon, and again, get it in Markdown. All of the monster stat blocks, by the way, from this come from Open5e. Open5e is a wonderful nonprofit program to make structured versions of 5e material available. I have done some volunteering myself for them to put lots of information, and these are all pieces of information that they have inside Open5e. So I'm able to draw the monsters from Open5e, build the HTML Markdown versions, and import them all into the 5e Artisanal database. So one other interesting feature we have here is an ability to add your own monsters. So it's a little trickier to add your own monsters to your local copy. So you cannot add monsters to your remote copy, the copy that I host. You can't add your own monsters to that one. However, if you download your own copy of the 5e Artisanal database, you can add your own monsters. I'll show examples of monsters that are customized, and that's actually the ones from Forge of Foes. So if I click Forge of Foes, we have these different generalist monster types, your brutes, your champions, your sentinels, things like that, soldiers, right? And these have stat blocks. And the interesting thing about these is in order to add a monster of your own type, there is an index file that you update with some basic metadata. This is the data that shows up in this list. We need to know what challenge rating it is. We need to know what type it is. We need to know what the source is. And we need the monster name and a link to the Markdown file. And when you put that in the index file, then you also put a Markdown file in a particular location. And you can do pretty much anything you want to do in that Markdown file. The style and the format for the Markdown file is not super rigid. So if you have a particular way you want to do your stat block, you can totally do that. But once it's in that Markdown file, the system automatically knows to pull in that data and show that data along with the other monsters that you have in the database. If you want to learn more about customizing monsters for your own version, download the Artisanal database, go down to the monsters section, read the README file that's in there, and it tells you the two files that you need to update. One file you have to copy and then modify, and then one file that you update in order to add monsters. If you're particularly crafty, you can write scripts that can take whole sets of monsters. If you have a whole bunch of monsters that somehow you already got into Markdown and you want to include them, you could write a crafty script that will update the index file with all of those monsters so that you only have to do it once. So one of the neat things, because I was able to add custom monsters, I actually added custom City of Arches monsters in here. We had 3 stat blocks in City of Arches, and I wanted to show how you can add custom monsters. So I included these City of Arches monsters, including the Nameless King. The Nameless King is a CR26 Arch Lich. This is the kind of Arch Lich I want to run. He's kind of customized for City of Arches, but you could definitely reskin him to be any kind of powerful Lich. I actually ran this guy against 6 15th level characters, I think. And he gave them what for? Killed 2 of them. So it's a powerful stat block. But this is an example of a custom stat block. This one is actually copywritten to me, so it's not available to put in your own published work, for example. But it is part of the Artisanal database. And you can see, of course, the Markdown version of the Nameless King as well. So that is the monsters section of the 5e Artisanal database. We have stuff like spells and magic items as well. We have a whole bunch of stuff in there. So lots of stuff in this one big application, one big suite of tools. But I wanted to show off the monster section today. So that's a way to see how you can add your own custom monsters to it. we got more information about the new D&D starter set. Is it called Keep of the Borderlands? On the Borderlands? Heroes of the Borderlands, the starter set is called. And I'm really excited for it. So it actually was at Gen Con. There were a bunch of these starter sets available at Gen Con. I don't think you could buy it there, but I think people were able to play it there. And I talked to a couple of people who did. I talked to some other folks who are very familiar with the product and learned more about what this thing has. So this is the $50 starter set for the newest version of D&D. 60 hours of playtime, multiple adventures that you can run. They say that there are 60 hours worth of material in there. I had some questions about the product that I finally got answered, particularly in regards to like how many character cards there are, and how many people you could play. And I got answers to all of that. So I had already talked about this in the past, but now there is an article linked down in the show notes called "What is Heroes of the Borderlands? Your Gateway to D&D Adventure," over on the D&D Beyond website, that talks about all the material that it has. It's got 3 adventure books: Wilderness, Caves of Chaos, and Keep of the Borderlands. The quick start guide that's supposed to get you up and running very, very quickly. 4 class cards: Fighter, Rogue, Cleric, and Wizard. And while I had heard, there are multiple cards there for a particular class, I wondered, did that mean you could actually play with more than 4 players? But the answer is not really, because the character cards have 1 card. So there's 2 cards for each character class. So 2 fighter cards and so on. And one of the fighter cards has the first level character on one side, then you flip it over for the second level character. The other one has a third level character with 1 subclass, and the other side is the third level character with the other subclass. So the game goes up to 3rd level. You can play through 1st, 2nd, and 3rd level before you would need to move on to something else. And I don't know if you could play with 2 of the cards simultaneously. What I heard is the best way to play it with more than 4 characters is have somebody get another normal D&D character sheet, and then of course they can play side by side with everybody else, but they're not going to have the cool cards with all the other stuff. So it's really designed for 4 characters, 4 players. Like 1 GM and 4 players is really what it's designed to play with. It's got 200 game cards for magic items, for monsters. The monster cards are like almost tarot size, or they're double the size of like a poker card. They have the stat block on one side and a nice piece of art on the other. I forget how many there were. I think I heard there's like 60 monster cards. I heard it was a lot of monsters. So that's really cool. One of the things I was thinking about that would kind of be a neat thing, and maybe I'll think about this for a Patreon product, is once you've got this starter set, you could write scenarios for this. And as long as you're not mentioning like, the actual place names, you wouldn't want to mention like Borderlands and stuff like that, but you could build like wilderness encounters or dungeon encounters. You could use your dice and maps for these dungeon encounters. And as long as you are aiming them for 1st to 3rd level character, and you are filling them with monsters that are included in this box and magic items in this box, you could write a whole series of like single session scenarios that are built off of the material that's inside this box set. So, you could kind of keep this thing alive for a while with additional scenarios. I think that would be really cool. 18 full color maps. Again, you could use those maps or use encounter maps like this in any of your own adventures that you want to run. And then a bunch of tokens, including tokens for the monsters, tokens for hit points, tokens for coins and everything like that. And a great big pile of dice, right? It's got an 11 set of dice. So if you want to learn more about the Heroes of the Borderlands starter set, you can find a link down in the show notes below. I talked to people that played it at Gen Con. I talked to people who ran it at Gen Con, and the overall assessment was, yes, this is really a good starter set. That GMs really enjoyed running it. Players really enjoyed playing it. The material, it's a hefty box. Like they said it's somewhere between a 4 and 5 pound box of material that's packed full of all of the stuff that you get for this starter set. So people have referred to it as the best D&D starter set that's ever been out there. And from the look of it, it looks really good. So I'm very excited to see this. I'm excited to see it in play, and I'm just excited for it. I think it'll be really cool. How do you choose the next RPG that you're going to run? Previously on this show, I have talked about how to work with your players to run games other than D&D, right? There are so many different role-playing games out there that we can enjoy. There's so many different styles of game out there that we can enjoy. But sometimes our players are just kind of eager to play D&D. They know D&D. They've got the rule books. They got all the stuff, and that's the game that they want to play. Also, D&D is really good. 5th edition D&D is a really good system. One of the things that makes it so popular is the fact that there are so many options, so many different combinations of characters and subclasses and species and other things. And then when you include all of the additional material that other publishers have published for it, there are hundreds of subclasses per class. There's so many ways to play this. And the style of game can change drastically as well. You can play heavy character-focused theater of the mind or heavy tactical 5-foot step grid. There's lots of different ways to play D&D as well. I've offered on my website and on videos here about how to play in these different styles. How do you play with an abstract map? How do you play with theater of the mind? What are the different ways that you can kind of manipulate this game? How can you choose the exact sources that you're going to run for a particular campaign? Like I'm running my Tales of the Valiant game. We're playing with a very specific set of 5e rules for that. But what about you? What kind of game do you want to play? I find myself in a unique situation right now where I have 2 games that are getting to the end of their cycle. We're in the tier 3/tier 4 eras of these games. We're getting to the final sort of quests and missions, and I'm starting to ask myself, what game systems am I going to run next? Of course, I could run D&D, but what about other systems? Like what are some of the other things that we might want to play? How do we decide what we want to play? So one question is, well, what games do you enjoy running? Do you enjoy heavy character-driven, story-focused games? Do you enjoy the kind of deep, enriched sort of tactical combat games? Do you enjoy the more challenge the players, exploration and survival kind of games, right? The style of game, you probably have a preference for the style of game that you want to run. I'm actually kind of good with all of them. I'm not super excited about super deep tactical combat focused games, right? There's a suite of games out there that definitely focus on that style of play that many people enjoy. But I know myself, and I know that I enjoy the more story focused games. I tend to even lean more towards that character driven story focused games than I do on the sort of player challenging games that you might find in the old school style games. But boy, I sure loved Shadowdark. And I would absolutely run Shadowdark again. And that definitely went into the more challenge the players, not the characters sort of style of the old school style games that you would find. So you may have particular styles of games that you enjoy, or particular styles of games that are probably not for you. I'm not really big into IP-focused games. I'm not really excited about games that are built in an existing IP like Star Wars or Alien or Blade Runner. Many people love those kinds of games. And again, I am not knocking people who want to enjoy those kinds of games. I don't think there's anything wrong with them. It's just not my gig. I sort of like to explore worlds that haven't really been defined or filled out. I would rather play a game like Mothership than I would a game like Alien. Now, I'll play Alien. I would love to sit down and play a session of Alien, but I'm not that excited to buy it and run it. I've heard wonderful things about it, but it's not really my style of game. I also know that I like fantasy games. I like fantasy games more than I like science fiction games. Numenera, the science fantasy game by Monte Cook Games, that's about as science fiction-y as I want to get. And that is really just a fantasy game that's got sort of a science fiction-y sort of undertone to it. But it's just the kind of game that I want. Now, here's the wonderful thing. You don't have to convince me to love tactical combat-focused games. And I don't have to convince you to play character-driven, heavy narrative-focused games. Right? We all get to enjoy the kinds of games that we want. And something that I see in the zeitgeist, in the kind of community, are people who really feel like everyone else should be playing this kind of game that I like. It's not uncommon that I will get people who leave comments on my YouTube videos or send me email and say, how come you never talk about Pathfinder 2? I don't need to talk about every game, for one, but if it's a game I'm not really that excited about, that's okay. And it's okay if you are really excited about it. I'm not knocking the fact that you're really excited about it. But you don't have to convince me it's good, nor do I need to convince you that it's not, right? We each get to enjoy the kind of games that we get to enjoy. And I have a particular style of play. You have a particular style of play. Mine is not any better than yours. Mine is not more official than yours is. All of us get to enjoy the kind of games that we want. Now, I will say it is worth trying almost everything, right? I will play pretty much any game. to get a feeling for what it's like and to see if it's the kind of game that I want. I played Blade Runner, right? I'm a huge Blade Runner. It's one of my favorite movies of all time, right? I absolutely love Blade Runner. And I played the RPG and it wasn't really for me, right? And it wasn't for me because, so in the circumstance we were playing, it wasn't great because it was like a bunch of strangers, but there was all this like inner party kind of, stuff going on about, sort of racism against androids kind of going on. And not only did I not really want that in my one-shot game, but I also don't really want to kind of examine that at the table. It's not really the thing that excites me about role-playing games. So I knew that game, as much as I like the IP of Blade Runner, the game of Blade Runner was not really the kind of game that I wanted to play. Just not that exciting for me. So we have so many other kinds of games, but I will try everything. And I think it is worth trying lots of RPGs because you get to learn a lot. You get to learn a lot about the atmosphere and the style, the GMing style that exists there, the mechanics for the game, tips that you might pick up that you can bring to other games. So there's lots of reasons to try other games whenever you have the opportunity. And the best place to do that is trying them at conventions, right? Going to conventions, going to like local conventions or regional conventions or even, countrywide or even global conventions in order to try them out. And what I would recommend is going to those conventions and focusing on the kind of games you don't typically play. Many of the people that I know that go to conventions specifically pick out the games that they don't get to play anywhere else. But there's also places online, places like Start Playing Games and others where you can kind of see that people are running games that you might not have been able to play before, and you can jump in for a session and try them out. So there's other ways to try them out as well. Most of these games have free samples. Lots of times you will find that role-playing games have free downloadable samples. So even if you don't have the chance to play it, you do have a chance to read it. And you have a chance to read it before you've actually invested any money in it. A lot of times they have system reference documents that are available for part of their licensing. Other times they have quick start or quick play guides that you can read. And that can give you a lot, right? That you can learn a lot of information about the kind of mechanics, how the game operates, what the style of game is like, what the production quality is like. There is lots of ways to kind of try them out. And then if you read it, you can look at it and say, yeah, maybe this is something I can run. And maybe I can convince a group of my friends to play it one time, right? Or I can, play one session. That said, I think it really takes about 4 sessions of a game for me to really understand what that game is like. I don't think I can get it in just one session. I played a session of Dragonbane. I liked it a lot, but I don't think I really understand Dragonbane from that one session. I really want to play Dragonbane in at least 4 sessions. I do feel confident enough to say, you know what, I like Dragonbane enough that I actually would like to run it for a small campaign for my group and see how that goes. But there's a lot you can get from that. Another way to understand these games is to watch live play games. Right? Like nowadays, and this is something that we've seen is, and something Wizards of the Coast has talked about, is more people are learning about role-playing games from watching live stream games than they are from their friends and family. That's the first time that's happened in 50 years. It's the first time that we've heard of that happening. And that means a lot of times if you have a game system you're interested in seeing, you can watch people play it by running them, by watching it online. So if you don't have a chance to play it yourself, but you're excited about it, you can go watch a video and see people playing it. And for a lot of people, that was the first time they were exposed to role-playing games overall. That was the first time they saw what the experience of playing a role-playing game is like at all, much less the system that they were running. But if you're interested in a particular system, there's almost certainly videos online of people playing that system so that you can see what that system is like. There's a kind of an investment because sometimes these games are 2 to 4 hours long, and so you've got a fair bit of video to watch. And they might not always give the absolute best impression of that game. So there's still parts of it there. But generally speaking, if you're curious about exactly how does this work in play, you can watch people play it and you can get more from that. Now, when I talk about like how to get your players to play other games, one of the best ways that I have found is to offer up a short campaign rather than a long one. So instead of saying, hey guys, I don't want to run D&D anymore, and now I want to run Shadowdark all the time. It's much easier to say, hey, now that we finished our D&D campaign, how about we try 4 sessions of Shadowdark and see what we think of that? And then we can go back to whatever game system we want to play after that. And you're essentially saying like, look, it's their commitment too, right? They're spending the time at the table to play that game. And yes, you're the GM, and you probably have 51% of the vote, but you still want to convince them why this game is going to be worthwhile. Like, what are the parts of this game that are going to be worthwhile? And one of the easiest ways to do that is to make the commitment low. Hey, let's just try it for a couple of sessions and see how it goes. Again, I said that like 4 sessions is kind of the you might have a good idea even sooner than that. But I would generally say it take about 4 sessions before you really understand the system that you want to play. So I feel like running a short campaign is a great way for both you and your players to understand what's going on. Also, I know a lot of GMs that get very excited for the next thing, that they might be in the middle of a game now, but they're like, oh yeah, but what I really want to do is play that one. Well, if you're running short campaigns, it's easier to jump to the next one. Right? You still have to design your campaign so that it has a good, fun conclusion to it. So you still want to have a good idea of what your story is going to be across those 4 sessions. But you can usually, 4 sessions is a good amount of time to be able to build a really fun arc that actually matters. You could probably, if the game has levels, that's a good time to get at least like 1, maybe 2 level ups so that people can see what character progression is like in the game that you're running, but also they can have a fun story. And then what you might find out is, we actually want to go a few sessions more, right? And I'm not saying that like you're lying to them of saying like, oh, it's 4 sessions, but it's really going to be 20, right? You might decide that 4 sessions is enough. You might decide that no, you've had your fill of it. I've definitely had systems I've run where I've run 4 sessions or so. We learned about it and I was like, okay, now I got a good feel for this game, and that it's not really exactly my style. There's other games that I would like. So there is a huge advantage. I think we are living in the best time for tabletop role-playing games. I think it is excellent right now. We have so many wonderful role-playing games. As of the recording of this video, we have games like Daggerheart. We have Draw Steel. We have 13th Age Revision 2. We have Shadow of the Weird Wizard. So we have games like The Land of M. We have games like Mythic Bastion Land. We have games like His Majesty the Worm. There are so many different RPGs, and the production quality in these games are off the charts. A lot of times I'm getting copies of these and I look at them and I'm just amazed. Like, these are relatively small footprint games, but holy cow, the production quality is really good. So it's more than ever, we have this wonderful chance to try all of these different games, see what games gel for us, see what games gel for our friends and our players around the table, and we can experience the sort of wide horizons of the wonderful hobby that we have. So think about what kind of games you're interested. I'm thinking about what kind of games I'm interested for the games that I've got going in the future. Find opportunities to try out these games, read the rule books, watch people play online, join up either online or at local conventions to play them, and maybe try them out at your own table. It is easy for us to get caught up in all of the business stuff that's going on tabletop role-playing games, all of the mechanics that are going on in tabletop role-playing games, the rule systems, character optimization, all the kinds of stuff that are go on about the physical realm of tabletop role-playing games. But sometimes we just need to remember to lose ourselves in the fiction. I was just recently on a chat with Luke Hart over at the DM's Lair. And at one point, I mentioned a funny situation that happened in my game where the characters teleported into a room where 10 wizards were fighting each other. And one of the wizards cast Cone of Cold, and one of the players cast Counterspell, and the other 9 wizards started casting counterspells to the anti-counterspells. And it created this massive psionic blast that sort of hit all the spellcasters with a bunch of damage. At which point, they all stopped, and they all looked at each other and said, okay, new rule, no one counterspells. Right? And he was laughing. And I was like, we were in the middle of a conversation talking about Critical Role, and we were right about to start talking about my big complaints about D&D Beyond, but we lost ourselves in the fiction, right? He was laughing about it, right? He was listening to the story earnestly, which is something not typical. Like, a lot of times when I talk about what goes on in my game, people start to gloss over. But he was really interested in what happened. And I just, for a moment, I was like, this is what it's about. These kind of stories that we're sharing about things that happen in the world. That's what it's about. We need to lose ourselves in the fiction of the game. The mechanics, yeah, they're there to help keep some structure to the game. The business side is its kind of own interesting hobby that we focus on. But boy, it's really, really fun to lose ourselves in the fiction of the game, to let the story of the game and the world of the game and the situations in the game, that's what grabs us. That's what we're imagining in our heads, and that's the kind of worlds that we're creating around the table. And it's so easy to kind of lose that as our real lives sort of poke in from the sides. It's real easy for us to forget to lose ourselves in the fiction of the game. So what are some ways that we can lose ourselves? How do we let ourselves get lost in the fiction? So there are a few ways we can do it for our game ourselves. One is that, like, active daydreaming. right? There's nothing wrong with staring up at the clouds and thinking about your game. There's nothing about thinking up about the locations. What do they actually look like? What do they smell like? What does that huge monument actually look like if you were standing there staring at it? Putting yourselves in the perspective of the characters going through these dungeons is really an interesting way to think about it. That's different from like what your map looks like or what the structure looks like or what kind of combat environment you want to build. Think about what the location looks like when you're actually staring at it from a point of view of the characters. The same thing with your NPCs. You can put yourself behind their eyes and into their own shoes, into their minds, and ask yourself, like, what are they thinking? What are they doing? What do they want? Your villains, what quests are they up to? What is their motivation? They're not just sitting around waiting for the characters to come around, right? What are they up to right now? That's a really powerful thing that you can do for your characters. That's a really powerful thing that you could do for your villains. But then another big one is feeding your mind, right? What is the fiction that you can sort of immerse yourself in to give yourself ideas for all of this stuff? And there are so many good sources for fiction. Movies, TV shows, video games, books, comic books, right? There's so many sources for this. And, seek out the good ones. Seek out the ones that you really like. Seek out the quality ones. It's okay to go watch the same movie multiple times if it's a really good movie and you really love just watching the characters do what they do. It's a fantastic way to get into it. And you can really get that influence of fiction from everywhere. This past weekend, I had sort of a movie marathon of my own where I picked 3 old 80s movies that I really loved. They're a little bit separate in their kind of set. The first 2 were Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 Hellbound, which are 2 of my favorite horror movies. I love those horror movies. They're right up there with like Prince of Darkness and other horror movies that I really dig. Not because, there's plenty of blood and they're super gory, right? And there's like fish hooks and the cheeks and stuff. It's really kind of gory stuff. But that's not the interesting part. The lore is the interesting part. Who the Cenobites are, what Leviathan is like, what the labyrinth is like, how the puzzle box can tear open portals between worlds. That stuff is really interesting. I actually ordered a bunch of Clive Barker's horror novels, which I hadn't really read because I was so interested in what was going on in Hellraiser and Hellraiser 2 Hellbound. The movies are actually pretty cheesy in some areas. Boy, they pour on the gore. I really, really like them. But man, they're dark and grim, I'll tell you that. And also, they're from the 80s. They're, the special effects in some areas, not quite holding up. But really cool ideas, really cool sort of world building stuff that I could get into. The other movie I watched, which is definitely on the other end of the spectrum, was Clash of the Titans. I watched the 1981 Clash of the Titans, the Ray Harryhausen old Greek mythology, Perseus and Medusa and the Kraken and Zeus and the gods and all of that stuff. Now, I'll tell you, if you're born after 1990, that movie's going to look pretty dated to you. But when I was a kid, I loved that movie. Not only do I remember every single line from that movie, I remember every sound that movie makes. Like when I was watching it again, every single little gear work bit of Bubo the Owl, I remember. And I'll tell you, like special effects wise, a lot of it doesn't hold up. Some of the special effects are amazing. The Medusa in that is amazing, right? And the whole setup of the Medusa is amazing. I really loved it. The river Styx and the boatman, fantastic. Calibos, who's I didn't know this, that Calibos isn't actually part of any Greek myth. Calibos was made specifically for this movie, but a kind of a neat character, kind of a tragic character. Really, really fun movie. And I got lost in it, right? I just get lost in the movie and I just enjoy it and I think about it. And I'll tell you, like as a battle arena, that Medusa battle arena, I'm going to drop that right into my Dragon Empire game because it works really, really well. That's an influence that I can take right there. The movies I love are not the movies you love. You get to choose what movies, what books, what TV shows, what video games, what comics matter to you. And I'll tell you, it seems to be highly generational. I, being a teenager in the 80s, have a set of movies that I just love and that I can watch 30, 40, and 50 years later and think back and be like, yeah, I still love these movies as much as I did. But I know people that were born later than I am, they look at them and I might as well be looking at movies from the 20s, 30s, and 40s, right? So we each get to choose the ones that influence us. And that's why I'm never really crazy about like the Appendix M lists. Most of the time when we see like a recommended movies or book list, all you're doing is scanning through looking for the ones that you agree with. You're generally not saying, oh, that's one I haven't heard of. Let me try that one. Oh, that's the one I haven't heard of. Let me try that one. A lot of times you're just looking for the ones you already know about to kind of confirm the ones that you've already chosen. So you get to choose what movies, what books, what TV shows, what comics, what video games matter to you. And it doesn't matter whether or not I don't think much of them or I don't even know of them. And it doesn't matter if you look at the ones that I absolutely adore. Movies like Excalibur, the original Conan the Barbarian, Time Bandits. These movies are like my favorite movies, right? I love these movies. I could watch them over and over again. And many other people hate these movies, or they look at them and go, they're really not for me, or they're kind of cheesy, or they're not nearly as interesting or exciting as newer stuff. That's fine, right? That's just like your opinion, man. You're allowed to have whatever opinions you want, and you're allowed to be influenced by whatever movies and books and TV shows influence you. The main thing is to remember to get lost in the fiction. So when we get lost in the fiction, what are some of the things that we can directly take from it and bring into our games? Great characters, right? The character of Calibos, the character of Athena, the characters that are in these movies, we can directly take them and bring them into our game. The old guy that worked at the amphitheater, the guy that was the old poet, right? He's a great character. He's played by Burgess Meredith. I think he's played by Burgess Meredith. We can bring those characters into our game, right? We can take those characters and their mannerisms and their style and their appearance, and we can just drop them right into our game. I love doing this. I love taking characters from fiction and dropping them right into our game. Cool locations, old, domed, ruined temples with pillars that are ivy covered and breaking down, filled with death dogs, right? What are cool locations that you can bring into your game that you can just see in the movies or in the TV shows and bring them right into your game? Lots of stuff like that. Cool situations, right? Like, what if a bunch of people are kidnapped by these troglodytes who live off in the hills, and they came out there because they were brought out, and then they kidnapped a bunch of people and brought them back to their lair, and you have to go and rescue them? What are the situations that you can find in these movies and go and use them as situations to drop into your own game? Fun scenes and encounters. Again, the encounter against the Medusa, really fun kind of encounter, and you can drop that in there, add some extra stuff to it, and turn it into something that you can do it. But most of all, what you can pull from these things is remembering to be a kid again, remembering to get lost in the fiction so that you can just enjoy yourself and get out of the real world and capture that feeling and bring it to the table when you're running it. Now, there are some things that you might want to avoid bringing over from these movies and TV shows and books and games. And a lot of time that's plots, right? The plots for these tend not to work. The starting situation can often work, but you're not in control of the characters, and you don't want to be in control of the characters. So if you watch a movie and you're like, I expect the characters to follow the same kind of arc that occurs in this movie, that doesn't work well. You've heard me talk about mysteries. I think mysteries are actually a really difficult type of adventure to run, because how the characters unravel the mystery can be very challenging. If you only have one way for them to figure out, that can be really hard. Jason Alexander talks about the 3-clue rule. I talk about having secrets and clues abstract from their location to discovery. So there are ways to have mysteries kind of unfold. But one of the tricky bits of the mystery is the idea that you shouldn't know the mystery until the end. Well, what if they figure it out right away? What do you do then? That's why those kinds of situations don't work out real well. So when you have a plot that requires an arc to go a certain way, that doesn't work particularly well. Don't try to bring the arc of a whole movie over. Instead, what's the seed that starts that movie? What's the goal of the accomplishment of that movie? And what are possible ways that they can get there? That's up to them. But the scenes, the situations, the locations, the NPCs, these are all things that you can bring into your game that work really well. So in the end, more so today than ever before, our attention is constantly getting pulled away in different areas. And I know, personally speaking, I find myself drawn to these high dopamine social media kind of things where I only have to read a quick thing and then go to the next one and read a quick thing. TikTok videos, YouTube shorts, Reddit posts, all kinds of social media posts that are on there. They're taking me away from the fiction that I want to lose myself in. I find it harder these days to just go and grab a book and read it, or sit down and watch a movie with my phone on the other side of the room. I find it hard to do that. And it's a real shame, but I think it's important for us to kind of remember to do that, to go read a real book, read a comic book, watch movies that you love, watch TV shows that you love, and lose yourself in the fiction. The real world will be there. You don't have to go sort the popular posts on Reddit anymore and listen to the "Am I being an asshole" posts anymore. Go read a book instead. Go read, an old Moorcock book. Read any kind of fiction that you enjoy, whatever you pick up, that's the stuff that you're really going to focus on. And remember to lose yourself in the fiction and then lose yourself in that same fiction when you're sitting there with your friends around the table. Let's do a couple of Patreon questions. Every quarter on Patreon, we have the Patreon Q&A. Patrons can ask questions all throughout the month. I ask for one question a month per patron related to tabletop role-playing games. I answer every one of those questions every Friday, and some of those questions I bring here to the show so that we can dive in a little deeper. Sam P asks, how do you keep progressing your 3 villains and fronts without throwing too many simultaneous plot movements at your players? E.g., if the PCs are currently focused on stopping villain 1, how much do you have villain 2 and 3 keep executing their plots in the campaign's background or foreground? I don't want my players to feel punished for focusing on one villain over another or feel like there are an overwhelming number of plot points for them to address. But it also doesn't make sense to me that the villain would be sitting around doing nothing instead of doing bad guy stuff. Really fantastic question. So yes, I love the idea. And in Return to the Lazy Dungeon Master, I talk about the idea of having like 3 villains in your main campaign. Who are the 3 villains? What do they want? And what quests are they following through on to try to accomplish their goal? I remember I have an anecdote that is directly relevant to this. So one of the players that I've played with for many years, back probably about 10 or 11 years ago, we played in a campaign using the Legacy of the Crystal Shard adventure from Wizards of the Coast in the earliest days of 5e. And there are 3 villains in that adventure, and they were all doing stuff. And I told the players, yes, there are 3 villains and they're all doing stuff. And every time the characters accomplish something with one of the villains, the other 2 would escalate. They would do something a little bit more. And the players were aware that this was going on. And one of the players said, when you told me about this idea of like this ongoing, continuing plot, I really thought I was going to love it. And now that I'm in it, I really hate it. And I was like, oh, tell me more. And she said, I feel like no matter what we do, we're always behind. Right? It's literally 1 step forward and 2 steps back. Like that's literally the math that's taking place when you have 3 villains that are moving forward and only one of them is being thwarted by the players. You're 1 step forward by thwarting that villain, but 2 other villains are doing stuff. So now you're 2 steps back. So since then, what I've done is the easiest way is turn down the dial. That the villains are not moving as quickly as the characters are, right? The characters are busy, they're very mobile, they're doing stuff, and the villains don't have to be moving around. They don't have to be constantly doing stuff. That their operations can be slower. And you, as the GM, you have the ability to turn that dial, slow it up, speed it up, and that really gets into pacing, right? That gets into making sure that the players feel like they are accomplishing things while these other villains are not. And generally speaking, I think it's okay to have essentially 3 villains, one who they are able to almost completely thwart when they focus their attention, one who they're going to significantly slow down and eventually thwart, and then one of whom they're going to have to really deal with at the end of their cycle. Right? When I ran my Eberron game, it was like this. They had 3 villains that were all trying to accomplish the same sort of thing. One of them they immediately were able to stop and defeat. Not immediately, but after the first arc of the campaign, they stopped that one. The second one was more challenging, but they were able to kind of regularly set that one back until eventually that one had to break down and couldn't accomplish his goals. And then the final one was the one that they knew was moving forward, and they made the most progress because the characters had done the least to stop them, but they still were able to stop them in the end. And that meant that the pacing was exciting. They knew that things were going on. They knew they couldn't waste a lot of time, but they were not behind, right? They never got to that time where they were behind. So my number 1 tip for this is to keep a hand on the dial of the speed at which the villains are completing their quests and maybe dial it down a little bit, right? You can choose to dial it up or dial it down, and you can do that based on the actions of the players and how fast they're going after things. But generally, you don't want them to feel punished. You don't want to feel like, oh man, we should have been working on this one thing because that escalated. But if we'd done that, then this other one, we're just hosed, right? You don't ever want them to feel dismayed that they weren't keeping up. So generally, I dial back the speed of the quests that the villains are on so that the players don't feel like they're losing ground. They feel like they're just keeping up, right? They're managing to get ahead. And every so often they find an angle that slows one group down significantly and then leave them there and then go back to work on the other group. You can do stuff like that too. So It's up to you as a GM to kind of decide to turn those dials, but you do not want to just have them all escalating at a constant pace so that the players can never keep up with things. Oliver W. says, one of my D&D players is going to start joining us online. The rest will still be in person. What are your tips for helping keep that online player immersed with the rest of the group? Another excellent question. These are all excellent questions. If they weren't excellent questions, I wouldn't have brought them to the show. Now, if you wrote a question that didn't make it to those, that doesn't mean it wasn't an excellent question. It probably means that I kind of covered it there, or I've covered it before, or I didn't feel like the scope of that question was something that's big enough, or it has to just kind of hit the right thing in my mind to go like, yeah, that's a good one for the show. So don't take it as a negative that it doesn't make the show. I still love you. I still love your questions. But all the questions here are ones that I'm excited to read anyway. What do we do for D&D players that are going to join us online? What are the tips for having it when you have like one player online? So good news, I've done this a lot. I have a group where we have one player who is in Colorado, where the rest of us are on the East Coast. And that player has now been playing remote while almost all of us have been playing online. But every so often, somebody else will play online, right? Every so often, we'll be able to drop in. What we do is we use Discord, and I use an iPhone. So I have just my iPhone. I have a little gorilla mount so that I can aim it at the map or aim it at the table if we have some kind of tabletop display. And we just use the audio for that. And the audio on newer iPhones is really, really good. So it can usually pick up everybody in the room. The people that are on Discord, they say they can hear everybody just fine. So from a setup perspective, just using an iPhone works well. I either use my friend's iPhone or I'll use my own iPhone. We'll set it up on the table and we'll get straightened out. The hard part, though, is that when you're running with most of the people in person, you're going to be focusing on those people a lot more than you're remembering that there are people online. And that's something you really have to manage. And that's a good reason why you have a question like this. My trick is to use the sort of Shadow Dark style always on initiative, not necessarily as an always on initiative, but what I like to do is on my battle mat, which I have in front of me, I write down all the characters' names and I write them in the orientation of the players sitting around the table so that I can see like what name is associated with what player around the table. And then wherever the camera kind of setup is, I put the name of that person there as well. Maybe if it's two people, I'll put two names there. And then what I try to do is I try to focus my attention on those names, not as much on the players, to make sure that I'm still talking to the players that are remote as often as I'm talking to the people online. I'm not fantastic with this. It doesn't work perfectly. Another trick that I would do, and that I've brought up to my players, something that I haven't really tried as much, but I think can work, is reminding the players to include the people that are online. To say like, look, I know it is hard for me to remember that we have my friend Pat online. Can you remember to bring him into your conversations? Can you remind me to bring him into the situation? But can you call out to them? And maybe if you're having in-character conversations, please include the people that are online. Help me to remember those people so that as a group, we're taking group responsibility for bringing those people online because it can be hard to do. I also tend to give the online people preference when people start to talk and you have to pick somebody to listen to. So if I hear the online person talking, I will stop an in-person person from talking and say, if you hang on one sec, let's hear what Pat has to say. And then Pat can say what he says, and then we go with that, and then we go back to whoever the other person was. That's sort of a trick when you're running online overall, is you people talking over one another is a real problem for online play. So it's important for the GM to arbitrate that and say like, everyone else stop, let's talk to Joe. Joe, what do you have to say? Okay, Joe, great. Sharon, what do you have to say? And kind of jumping around from person to person, almost like an interviewer has to do, right? If you're like running a bunch of panels on an interview, it's always better to pick somebody than it is to leave it open to the group to ask something. Try to choose people to talk. That works well for online play, but it can also work well when you're doing online and in-person play. So those would be my best tips. Write down the names of the characters and use that list in front of you when you're calling on players to do things, when you're kind of going around the table. That always on initiative from Shadow Dark can actually work really well to make sure that everybody's getting equal screen time, even if they're running remote. And then ask your players to help you out. Ask all the players to say, hey, please remember there are folks online. If you could help me remember that they're online, then that can be an easier way to make sure that they're included in the game. David S. says, when you reviewed the early 2024 material, you talked about how the new rules may slow down combat. Did this play out as you thought? Do you have any advice on making 24 combat zip along? Has it slowed down combat? Not as much as I would have thought, at least so far. Now, in fairness, I have not played run a D&D 2024 only game yet. I have played a high level 5e game where three of the 6 players are playing D&D 2024 characters. 2 of those players have weapon masteries. Weapon masteries was the area in particular where I thought that players would have more, that things would slow down. And we are now in tier 4. So they have been playing D&D 2024 characters for a good while, basically since the rules came out or pretty shortly after. So more than 6 months, they've been playing D&D 2024 characters from basically low tier 2 to low tier 4. So I feel like that's a pretty good feeling for it. They have more options. They definitely have more stuff. Now, the players are pretty experienced, so they know how to include the stuff that they've got. So I wouldn't say that the weapon mastery stuff has eaten a whole lot of extra time. But they definitely have more options that they choose from. And I know if there are players who find more sort of decision paralysis coming in, these players are very efficient. They know what to do. They know how to do it. They go with it. They're very quick on the game. So it did not slow them down. I think players who have a lot of decision paralysis, players who are really kind of constantly optimizing, I think that they are going to have more trouble. They're going to have more trouble with a lot of the options, but I haven't found it slow down very much. Something that has helped combat zip along more is I think D&D 2024 monsters tend to have a little bit fewer hit points, or they certainly seem to drop faster and yet do a lot more damage. So the threat level of these monsters is really high, but I don't know that battles are taking much longer because they're not going 3, 4, 5 rounds. I ran a multi-phase battle yesterday where the culmination was fighting a storm giant. This was against tier 3 characters. And the storm giant hit them like a freight train, right? They just got hammered with damage. But he still dropped in like 9 turns, right? He didn't last even a full 2 rounds. I think he was going to kill people, literally like kill characters, if he got to his second round, if he got to his third turn, right? He got 2 turns. And if he'd gotten to his third turn, he would have started killing characters because they were already beat up from the previous fights and stuff like that. But he was already dropping them pretty quickly. And I think he was going to start knock almost everyone unconscious. I don't think it was a TPK, but it was really close. But they managed to defeat him before he got his third round. So I think that speed has worked out pretty well. But all of the same tricks on how to speed up crunchier play. The biggest one, fewer players, right? If you have fewer characters around the table, combat goes faster, right? Six characters is a lot longer than 4 characters. That's one. Running at lower level games can always speed things up, right? So high level games with lots of players are going to go a little bit slower. When you're running those, it's not so much a matter of trying to keep combat fast as it is of making sure that the battle remains continually interesting, that things are going on. They're learning things. Phases are coming in. Enemies are running away. New enemies are coming in. You want to make the battle really dynamic so that even if it's a long game, I ran a 2-hour battle yesterday, but it was multiple phases and lots of things going on and lots of like conversations that were going on and saving prisoners before they were going to get sacrificed and all kinds of stuff that happened. So I don't think it was a boring, even though it was almost a 2-hour fight, I don't think it was a boring 2-hour fight. I think it was a pretty interesting 2-hour fight. Other tricks, same way, tell the player who's up next that they're going to be up next so they have an opportunity to pick their stuff. Try to ask players to read up on all of the stuff that they need to read up on before their turn. Some players are really good about knowing exactly what they're going to do and doing it. Other players like kind of hem and haw. But, what you can do is tell people like, hey, try to have your actions ready when it's your turn, right? And work with them to be able to do that, particularly when they have a lot of options. That can work well. Sometimes it doesn't always work well other times, but that can be things. I'm not a big fan of like the timer. I think that just stresses people out. Oh, you have 1 minute to choose your thing or else you guard. I don't like doing that. Other people do, and if it works for you, it works for you, but that doesn't really work for me. But those are the things that come to my mind. In general, though, I have found D&D 2024 to be running pretty smooth. I actually really like it. And, I don't know when I'm going to run a full D&D 2024 game, but someday I'm sure I will. And I'm looking forward to doing so. Friends, I want to thank all of you for hanging out with me today while we talked about all things in tabletop role-playing games. I hope you enjoyed this show. If you did, the best thing you can do to get more stuff like this is to subscribe to the Sly Flourish newsletter. It is absolutely free to sign up. You can find a link down in the show notes. You get a free weekly RPG-related article sent to your inbox every week with links to all of the other stuff I do, other tips, other topics, all kinds of stuff you get, plus one main topic for the newsletter. You also get a free adventure generator for signing up. You can also become a patron of Sly Flourish. Patrons get access to all kinds of tips, tricks, tools, the 5e artisanal database, lots of stuff you get for being a patron. Most of all, you help me put on shows like this. Thank you for that. And you can pick up any of my books at the Sly Flourish bookstore, which right now we have 20% off all Sly Flourish books, except City of Arches, available at checkout on the Sly Flourish bookstore. You can pick all of that up. Thank you so much. Have a great day, and get out there and play an RPG.